What is it about books, whether that's fiction or non-fiction, that you think people enjoy so much?
Books to me are like an escape. You're sitting in your reality and whatever that happens to be, right? And it doesn't even matter what your reality is. Whatever it is, we like the ability to sometimes get out of that. And of course, taking a vacation would be wonderful, but you can't always do that. And books allow you to escape even on a little short term. I have 10 minutes. I can read a chapter. I can do something. I think the other thing that books do is they help you explore. And so, whether that be fiction or nonfiction, you can learn about things you wouldn't otherwise know. Um, I think about like my historical fiction. I wrote a story about a woman living in Soviet Ukraine.
Right.
Well, I've never lived in Soviet Ukraine. I can't really know what it's like to live in Soviet Ukraine, but when I read books about a woman living in Soviet Ukraine, I can kind of put myself into that character, even if it's momentarily, and get at least some semblance of an idea.
Mm.
So it allows you to do things you couldn't do. Like I'll never be a president, but yet I could read a book about one and kind of maybe have a little idea of what that's like. Or I've never been, you know, anything that I haven't been, right? And you get to explore that. And I think you can also sometimes explore, like, I don't know, social constructs and things,
Hmm.
and you get to do it in a way that's very private. In today's world, especially with social media and everything else, I mean, if you try to explore something in real time, people immediately label you. So you could be labeled very quickly as a racist or a misogynist or a whatever ist that they want to label you as, right?
Yeah.
But if you're exploring it while reading, that's a private thing. And so you can read a book in which maybe racism is something that comes up, and then you can, like, take on the different characters and you can try to see how one would feel and how the other. You can look at all sides, and there isn't anyone there judging you and throwing names at you and whatnot. So I just think books just give us that ability to, like I said, get away and then explore, and explore not only knowledge but our social constructs of the time.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense about that sort of looking at social constructs and looking at
Yeah.
challenging topics in that sort of
Right.
space, safe space.
Because challenging topics can be really scary when you're sitting in a public space. And let's say that you're in some place where they're having a debate. You're almost afraid to say anything because what if what you say is wrong?
Mm.
What if what you say was only a half-formed idea at this point, and as you learn more facts, you change your mind? Well, it's too late. It's already out there. You're already labeled whatever you were labeled. All of those things. But when you're reading, you have the ability to take things in and think about them and move them around and come up with your own opinions and change your mind again. And there isn't anyone there writing down all of your thought patterns and saying, oh, well, we're now going to label this woman as whatever they're going to label you as.
Yeah, yeah, it gets away from the sad reality of that. And
Right.
unfortunately, like modern day debate is that there's no
Exactly. There
in
isn't debate.
in an ideal world, right? A debate is
Right.
I say an opinion, you might say an opinion, and we discuss the differences and trying to find like a middle ground or something.
Right.
But it seems like we've gone to this place where you just shout someone down, call them an ist of whatever
Of
ist
whatever. Right.
fits, and just use
And
that
then
to
walk
disregard everything.
away.
Yeah.
You're right. And then walk away with absolutely no understanding of the other side of the debate.
Mm,
We
yeah.
we don't do that anymore. I remember a time. I'm 61. I recall when I was younger, the news would come on. The news anchor would say something. My parents would sit at the table and discuss the pros and cons of whatever was said. That's where the pros and cons happened. It didn't happen on the television.
Mm.
It happened around dinner tables. It happened amongst friends, and people would discuss it, and then they would walk away, no one angry. And sometimes they would walk away still convinced they were right and their friend was wrong or whatever. But it wasn't an anger thing. It was just a fact.
Yeah.
I believe this, you believe that. Okay, on we go. And I even remember a time where politicians would fight it out, during a congressional session, and then they would go have lunch together. opposite sides. We don't see that anymore, and that's such a shame. And so to me, books are very valuable in that at least gives one outlet for that kind of, at least in your own mind,
Yeah.
ability to look at all sides of an issue. It's one of the reasons I love writing books with more than one point of view. I absolutely love having like 3 points of view, 3 different ages, so that we see things from very different life experiences. And then really, let's look at that. What does that look like? Because those 3 people will see things very differently. And that came to me thinking about when when I was growing up, my grandparents used to constantly talk about the Depression. And I was thinking, it's over. Why are we still talking about it? Right? We don't need to save tinfoil. We don't need to, like, why are we still talking about this? Well, now as an adult, and I'm still talking about 9/11, right? And I think my grandkids are like, what is 9/11?
Yeah, of course.
Right? And I realize that, wow, it's where we stand. You know, I know 9/11 from I was an adult woman with 4 children, and I know the fear that I had, etc. My children were children, so they saw it from, they were 3 to 12. So they saw it from whatever age they were, and they have their remembrances. Their children only know it from what other people have said, and their children, do you see what I
Who
mean?
knows?
And
Yeah.
so I love that ability, and I think books can do that. It can allow you to really explore from all these different angles and see maybe a fuller picture.
Yeah, I really like that. What was it that inspired you to start writing in the first place?
So as a little kid, I said I wanted to be an author.
Oh, okay.
But I also said that I wanted to be a heart surgeon, and I don't like the sight of blood. And I said I wanted to be an Olympic ice skater, and I'm very klutzy. So I don't think that I really knew, but I've always loved books. I have been enamored with books. I was the kid that had the flashlight up under the bed covers when I was supposed to be sleeping. My mom would tell me go outside and play, and I'd push a book out the window and take the book and climb a tree and read. I mean, that was who I was. In like 2000, I started writing for small businesses. You figure the internet was relatively new. People were putting their businesses, getting a business website out there just as fast as they could. But unfortunately, they were horrible. And the things that they wrote were poorly written, and it just wasn't done well. And I realized I was a stay-at-home mom, and I realized, hey, I have an opportunity here because I'm a decent writer and I could help them make this not be an embarrassment, So I reached out to small businesses, and that's what I did. And I did that for 20 years. And it was a nice little gig that I was doing. But during that time, I started thinking, I really, really want to write. Like, I want to write my own books. But at the time, I was living in an emotionally abusive relationship, and you can't stick yourself out on the line when you don't have a safe spot to land, because when you're dealing with nonfiction website stuff, it wasn't me. It was all about my client, what they needed, what they wanted, the facts that they wanted presented. And all I was doing was finding a nice, neat, concise, accurate way of putting it out there for them. But when you're writing a novel, like, that's coming from somewhere deep inside you. My characters are mine. They're my creation. The scenes are mine. Everything is mine. And so if someone doesn't like it, that's like, someone feels like you're stabbing you in the heart. And if you don't have a safe spot to land at home, well, then you don't try that. Well, I got out of that relationship in 2017, and words started pouring out of me. And I just started writing manuscripts. And the first several were horrible because, just, I tell everyone, like, Picasso's first painting wasn't good either. I mean, you have to learn. But what I learned from that first one was that, I had words. Like, I wrote 50,000 words in a week and a half.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I have words. And it had a beginning and middle and end. It had characters. It's just that there were a lot of things I needed to learn about that process. And so I wrote several manuscripts, but you figure now I spent 14 years in that emotionally abusive relationship, And I wasn't showing my work to anyone
Mm.
because I didn't believe in myself. Then I met Bruce, who became my husband, and he was one of those people who just believed in me completely, and he kept encouraging me. But we eventually took a bicycle ride from the coast of Oregon to Washington, D.C. So we rode 3,102 miles on a tandem bicycle. And for me, this was huge because I had not been on a bicycle in 40 years. And
Wow.
so this was not like Teri doing Teri. This was Teri way out of Teri's comfort zone.
Fantastic.
And it was hard. And it tested me in physical ways, but also in emotional ways. And as we were finishing up the ride, so we're coming into Washington, D.C., we stopped at the Marine Corps Memorial because my husband was a 25-year Marine vet, and we were raising money for Toys for Tots. And so it was just like the perfect place to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And we're coming up this hill, and he says, "Do you see that flag?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "That's it. That's the memorial. That's where we're stopping." And I started to laugh and cry at the same time. And that went on for an hour. I was just a complete mess. And I thought, I just made it across the United States on a tandem bicycle.
Yeah.
I can do anything. It's not a matter of can I, it's a matter of what. What do I want to do? And I thought, I want to be an author. And 14 months later, my first novel came out.
Mm. So you said how long that journey was in miles. How long in sort of days? And tell us a bit
So
more
it,
about how that came about and what you learned on
yeah,
that journey.
so it was 72 riding days, but we were out there a little over 90 days because you have to take rests. I mean,
Yeah.
we were not spring chickens. We weren't 20-year-olds, pushing it across there. So we actually went during the summer of 2020, so COVID summer. So just to give you kind of a feel for that. And we were supposed to leave in the middle of May, but in the middle of May, everything was closed. There was no riding, and we thought we weren't going to be able to go on the trip, and decided that if we could start by the middle of July, that we could still do it and get back before the weather changed to the point that it wouldn't be, smart to be out there.
Yeah.
We actually started the very end of June, so we were able to get out there, and we finished up. I think it was October 2nd or 3rd, and came into DC, and the ride was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and probably the most important thing that I've ever done in my life in terms of for me, because I went from being someone who didn't believe in herself, who thought that she didn't have a lot of worth, who was very unsure of herself, and I tell people I didn't actually change. I found the me that had been damaged. I found the me that life had thrown all kinds of junk on top of. And I had lost those pieces, but they were still there. They were just hidden underneath all of the debris. And this ride helped me clear out all of that debris and put it where it belonged, which was mostly in the trash. And things that didn't belong in the trash, at least they got put in a box somewhere, and they only come out now when I need them, as opposed to, being there all the time. And I just recognized that, I'm capable. I'm intelligent. I have talents, that there isn't anything that I can't do if I choose to want to do it. And for me, it was a definite turning point in my life. And so I recommend all people find that kind of challenge in their life, whether it's something huge like riding across the United States, or even something small like, gee, I'd like to learn to watercolor, or I think I'd like to move to a different place in the United States, or something, something that kind of causes you to go outside of your comfort zone. Because each time you step out of that box you've put yourself in, you realize how much more you are.
Yep. Yeah, it becomes a growth opportunity, doesn't it, when you step outside that comfort zone?
Absolutely. And this was a huge growth opportunity. Like I said, I hadn't been on a bicycle in 40 years. So he and I spent about a year and a half prepping.
Right.
So we did a lot of bicycle rides, and I had to find a saddle that felt good, and the right clothing for me, and all of the other things that you don't even really think about. And even with all of that, on day one, I thought, oh, we've bitten off more than we can chew. Like it was hard. It was hard from day one. I live on the coast of North Carolina. That's flat. And by flat, I mean flat. My home is on one of the higher points in my county at 35 feet above sea level. So flat. And then the very first day we're in Oregon crossing over the mountain range.
Were there any days during that journey that you thought you couldn't go on, or
Oh yeah.
any blocks that you
Yeah.
came up against?
There's one in particular. We were in Montana, and I swear you're in Montana for a long, long time. Montana is a very wide state, and at 40 miles average a day, you're there a long time. So I feel like 90% of my stories happened in Montana. But we were in Montana, and we had to go 75 miles that day. There was no option because there was nothing between where we had spent the night and where we were going to. So and that's a long day on a tandem bicycle.
Yeah.
Our average was 42 miles. So 75 miles is a long day. That day was hot. So it was like 90 degrees and no trees. So just, and you're out on the road. So you just have even more heat. It was very hot. The wind was blowing toward us instead of behind us, which just makes everything even harder. It was hilly and there were mosquitoes. We went through one valley that had mosquitoes, and I swear to you, they were drinking bug spray for breakfast. They were landing all over us. And then just to make everything even more fun, our back tire had a flat not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Wow.
So we pull into the town where we know we're going to stay, and we didn't even make it to the motel yet, and we stopped on the side of the road, and we were just we finally make it to the first motel that we see, and calling it a motel is being very kind. It was smoking rooms only. It was horrible, but it was there. There was a bed, there was water, and across the street was a hamburger joint. So we weren't going to have to get on the bicycle to go eat.
Yeah.
And it was like, yay, we're here. And that evening, I kept a blog the whole way across the United States. And that evening, I wrote in my blog, I think we're done. I said, this isn't fun. I'm not having any fun anymore. I can't see going on. This makes no sense. And I had a friend reach out to me who said, first of all, if you quit today, you've done more than most people. You went over the Rocky Mountains on a tandem bicycle. You've been over 1,000 miles. You do not have anything to hang your head over. But I'm going to give you a piece of advice. And that turned into one of my rules in my book that I wrote, which is never quit on a bad day. She said, you'll always wonder, could you have completed it? She said, instead, I think what you should do is pull back. Maybe make tomorrow a no ride day or a low ride day. Spend a couple of days taking it easy and just enjoying where you are. And if at the end of that you still say to yourself, yeah, we're done, well, then you can quit and everything is fine because you've made it a rational decision. But don't do it on a bad day. And then she kind of signed off with, and of course, whatever you decide, so proud of you, da, 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 da. Well, the next day was a wonderful day, and we did complete the journey. So her advice was very strong for me. But I've used that piece of advice over and over in my life since then.
Yeah.
Don't quit on a bad day. Because let's be honest, on a bad day, you're tired, you're hungry, you're emotionally, whatever. Something like the sun rose this morning could make you want to stop, right? And so I think that it's good to be able to say, pull back, take those deep breaths, give yourself a chance to write a list. What's good? What's bad? Is this still meeting my needs? Is this really what I want? And being able to go through it in a more rational way. I tell people all the time, the rule is not don't quit. It's don't quit on a bad day. Because sometimes quitting is exactly what you should do. If it's no longer serving you, if this isn't getting you to where you want to go, if you're in a bad job, a bad relationship, whatever it is, and it's not good for you, by all means, quitting is what you should do. But don't do it in the midst of a fight or in the midst of a horrible day at work where your boss was a complete jerk or whatever. You want to wait until you've had a chance to think it all the way through and make a rational decision.
Yes, it's a great piece of advice. Like you say, on that worst day, everything in your mind is working
Everything
against
makes it
you,
worse.
right?
Yeah,
So
I don't like the way my shoelaces feel. I
yeah,
mean, everything can make you just, I'm so done.
yeah,
And I'm a very emotional person, and my emotions tend to come out very quickly. And I learned on this trip to allow that.
mm,
Like, that's how I process things. I go ahead and I let all the emotions out. And once I've done that, now I can say, okay, what needs to be done?
mm.
My husband learned that from me. So we were probably only a week in, and I'm standing on the side of the road sobbing. I can't ride anymore. And he looks a little distraught. We've been married a little over a year at this point, and he's like, oh no, I guess we're done. I don't know. So I got done crying, and then I kind of wiped my eyes and I said, all right, let's get on the bike. And he looked at me like, what? And I said, well, we can't stay here. I mean, we were on the side of the road by some cows and a tree. Like, there's no way we can stay here. I just needed to get rid of the emotional junk. And once I cleared it out, it was like, okay, so what do we need to do?
Mm.
Well, we need to get on the bike so we can get to the hotel so that I don't have to ride. Like, that's the next step. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Just taking it back to your writing and the novels that you
Yeah.
write, what does that process look like for you? Because a lot of people read and they might not understand how much work actually goes into a book. So take us through
Yeah,
that.
there's a lot. And I'm going to like apologize up front. I am not the perfect author that has like this schedule and everything else. It's not the way my mind works, and it's not the way I write. So I tell people that I am what I call a pantser, which means that I write by the seat of my pants. I don't normally have an outline. I have an idea, and I start with that idea, and I just start writing, and I see where it goes. Um, and I love that process of discovering what's going to happen. And I'm often as surprised as my readers are when they're reading it. It's like, oh, that's what's going to happen next. I don't know where it's coming from, but I love it. The other thing is I don't write every day because I think maybe having lived in an abusive relationship for 14 years, I don't like people telling me what I have to do. And so the idea that I have to get up every morning and write for 3 hours, it does not appeal to me. So I tell people I'm a binge writer. I'll think about things, and I'll be thinking, and I'll have thought through a lot of stuff in my head. So I'm kind of like writing in my head in terms of like what's going to happen next. And when all of a sudden it kind of solidifies, like, oh, I know what I'm going to do, I sit down and start writing. And I might write for 8, 9, 10 hours. And then I might not write again for a week. But so that's kind of my process.
Mm.
Um, I get my books out pretty quickly, the first draft, but that first draft isn't, you can't show that to anyone. I mean, it's pretty much just the story is out of my head. It now has the major parts, and then I have to go back and do all of the editing that goes with it. So I can get a story out. Like if I like to go on a retreat where I'm away from home and away from any responsibilities, and in 2 weeks I can have a 60 to 75,000 word first draft done.
Mm.
But then it's going to take me 6 months of editing
Yeah.
because now I have to go back and change the fact that every sentence started with I. You know, you know, and that I have absolutely no details about where they are, and nobody knows what my characters look like, and all of the conversations are flat because when I'm doing that first word dump, I don't try to clean anything up. I just let it out, type as
Mm.
fast as I can, trying to keep up with the brain that's going up, 1,000 miles an hour. So I get that out, and then I go back and I do a cleanup, and I do another cleanup, and then you do another cleanup until it finally gets to a place where you can now show it to a real editor who can then help you find the things you can't find yourself.
Yeah. It sounds like the sort of writing that I think I would do is just getting it out in some format and then re-going. Because I know
Yeah,
there's some people who, as they go through the first bit, they look at a sentence and they just keep fussing
yeah.
over very small bits, and
And
they get
that doesn't
stuck.
work for me. Yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't
no.
work for me. I was actually in a residency with a woman who did that. And in that residency, we were together I was there for 2 weeks and so was she, but we overlapped 1 week. And during that 1 week, I wrote about 45,000 words and she wrote 10 pages. But her 10 pages were perfect
Yeah.
and my words were not. but we just do it differently.
Yeah.
She wordsmiths the whole way through, and it takes her probably about the same amount of time from start to finish. But when she says, I'm done, she's ready to send it to an editor.
Yeah.
And when I say I'm done that first time, I'm not really done. I'm just done with getting that out. And now I have to go back and be done. And so I think everybody just has different processes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then like people who like to plot and have everything done beforehand, they do a lot of work before they start writing. They've done tons of research, and they've created character profiles, and they have all of this stuff that they've done. And then when they write, they don't have as much editing to do. When I write, I have a lot more editing to do because I didn't do any of that up front. So we do about the same amount of work. It's where do you want to do it? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just think it depends on how does your brain work best. When I'm given this you need to write within these parameters, I feel like my creativity turns off. And my creative brain is far more fun than my, normal everyday, here I am out in the world brain. And I need to let that creative brain come out and kind of play and do what it wants to do. And it won't do that if I've got it all hemmed in with, here are the 18 things I think need to happen in this scene.
For someone listening who maybe wants to start writing and they're sort of looking at it or listening to this and thinking, yeah, definitely something I want to get started with, but where on earth do I start?
Yeah.
Can you give any advice for how they can just get started in small steps?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you've got to do is actually like sit down and start writing. Like you have to decide, like, what do you want to do? Are you thinking about a book? Are you thinking about a short story? Like kind of decide like what is that? And then you need to just try your hand at it. Like don't even worry that it's going to be good or bad, because I'm going to tell you your first one's going to be horrible, and that's okay. Because this isn't about perfection. This is about learning. So try it. See where it is. Take a look at it. Be honest with yourself. What do you need help with? Like when I looked at my first one, it was like, oh, my characters are really flat. Like I wouldn't read this. This is horrible. Well, then I learned about, okay, so I need to learn about how to do characters. Well, there's all kinds of classes out there that you can take. There's all kinds of, and some of them are free. Some of them are real inexpensive. You can join writers groups in your local community and show your work to someone and let them tell you some things you could do, like anything. But be honest with yourself. Once you've written things that you start saying, that's not so bad, now you need to find a critique partner. And this is someone who is kind and honest. Okay, you don't want a critique partner that just slashes everything you do and makes you feel horrible about yourself as a writer. You want someone who can tell you what you've done right, because I guarantee there are things in there that are good, and someone who can say, and here are a few things that you might want to do, because as a reader, and then you have to listen to that. And so if your ego's too big, it's very difficult to be a writer, because you believe you already know what your reader wants, and you have to be able to kind of step out of that and say, okay, I know that this was my baby that I've written, but there are things that can be done to make it better. And so you've got to be willing to listen. And then I think the last thing I tell people is you don't have to listen to everybody, because no book is perfect for every single person. No author is every single person's favorite. There are authors out there that people love, like James Patterson. Everybody knows who he is, but not everybody likes his work. And I don't think that he goes to bed at night crying because there's someone who said, I don't really care for his book. Because not every author, not every book appeals to every person. So sure, try things out, but if it really doesn't work for you, if it doesn't fit your style, if when you read it you think, I don't like it anymore, then don't do it. It's okay to be true to who you are as well, because there will be people who like what you have to write.
Definitely the point of just starting is something that I really
just
resonate
start.
with.
Yeah.
It's such an important thing, just doing the thing. Like with this podcast, I've spoken about it a couple of times, where I spent about 6 months or so coming up with the name, the artwork, overthinking, do I need a studio? Can I do it at home, etc. And ultimately just doing the thing and taking that first step was the biggest thing.
Right, because you do it, and is the very first podcast you did, was it the best one you've ever done? No, but it's okay,
Yeah.
right? Because you wouldn't have ever gotten to the second podcast if you hadn't done the first one. And it's the way I feel about my writing, my manuscripts. My first manuscript, it's buried, it will never come out. I'm not even going to try to fix it. It's so bad. But that's okay. Because of the first one, I did a second one, and because of the second one, I did a third one. Because of the third one, I got my book. Right? And after that book, I had another book and another book. So I now have 5 books out. So I have 3 novels, my 10 Little Rules for a Double-Butted Adventure book, and then I have a children's picture book. Did I know anything about writing children's picture books? No, I did not. But I just said, sure, why not? Because you can't do it until you do it.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, I can't learn to play tennis by reading books about it. I probably can't learn to play tennis, but
that's something I was going to say is like linking it into something that everyone can resonate with, because podcasts and writing maybe is a bit of a niche, but if you were going to learn a sport or a language, you wouldn't expect to go in on day one and be perfect
fluent.
at it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, can you imagine? Okay, I'm going to learn French. Today I'm going to go have a conversation with someone in French, and I'm going to have it perfect. No, on day one, you're going to learn how to say hello. And you might be able to say, my name is. You will pronounce it all incorrectly.
Yeah.
You will have to say it very slowly. And if someone were to say to you, oh, hello, my name is, you're not going to understand a thing they said. And that's the truth. And that's the same thing with writing, or anything that you want to get started with in life. You know, you kind of jump in with both feet and big eyes and hold your breath and hope it works out. And then you start saying, okay, of this mess that I've just created, what do I see that I can fix? And often you can see for yourself certain things like, oh, I should have done this. Well, do that next time. You know, start working on what I call the low-hanging fruit, those things that are obvious to you. And once you've worked on everything that's obvious to you, that's when you need a critique partner. That's when you need to work with someone else and say, hey, you take a look. What do I need to do?
Yeah, for sure. And sort of going back to the book, so you spoke about obviously your journey across America, and that's your latest book, right? It's called 10 Little Rules for a Double-Butted
10 Little Rules for a Double-Butted Adventure. Right.
That's it. So you've sort of alluded to one of the rules and you spoke about that. I wonder is that your favorite rule? Is there any other rules that you really...
So it was my favorite rule until recently, and I have another favorite, and I'll explain why. But real quickly, I just want to say this book isn't really about riding across the United States. I mean, it is. I use the stories to describe it, but these are rules to help you live an adventurous life, to help you get outside of that box, you know, that we put ourselves in. So even if you don't ride bicycles, you know, have you ever wanted to do something a little bit outside your comfort zone? If so, that's what this book is for. So now is the sad part of my story. We got back from our ride in October of 2020. The following fall, we rode the coast of Maine, and it was beautiful. We had a wonderful trip. It was a much shorter trip.
Yeah,
2 weeks. 2 weeks, very, very short. And then the following summer, in June of 2022, my husband was diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is an incurable brain cancer. He was given 8 months to live, and he lived longer than that. He lived almost 2.5 years. He passed away in January of this year. On the day that he passed, I had been waiting for my author's copy of 10 Little Rules for a Double-Butted Adventure. He had seen the cover in terms of like on a computer screen. I had talked with him about the different rules and things, but he had not seen the book. At 2:00 in the afternoon, my author copy came. At this point, he was no longer opening his eyes, and I told him all about the book. I sat on the side of the bed and I just told him all about the book. And I crawled up in bed with him and had my head on his shoulder, and I started reading it out loud to him. And I read the introduction, rule number 1, rule number 2, and I got to rule number 3. And I said, rule number 3, do hard things. And he died. And I feel like it was me giving him permission to do something very difficult, which was, as a 25-year Marine, you don't give up a fight. And he didn't have a choice. You know, this was a disease that he couldn't have beat regardless of what he did. It was an unbeatable disease. So I gave him permission, but also in the last couple of months of his life, he no longer could speak sentences. The tumor was in the speech center, and so it disrupted his ability to, he knew what he wanted to say, but he couldn't get it out of his mouth.
Mhm.
I feel like it was his last words to me as well. Do hard things, because he knew these next months were going to be very difficult and that it was going to require me to do hard things. And
Mhm.
so that's something that I learned on that trip is we can do hard things. You know, it's possible. It might not seem possible, but we have a lot deep down in us, a lot of grit that we can pull that allows us to do things beyond what we believe is possible. You know, and if you'll kind of get rid of that limiting belief of, well, I can't, then you're really quite capable of doing really difficult things. So that's become my favorite rule right now. That's the one that gets me out of bed in the morning on days that I want to just crawl under the bed instead of getting up.
Mhm.
I'll say, okay, Teri, come on now, do hard things. And I throw my feet out of the bed and, get started on my day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'm so sorry that you went through that, and
yeah,
you speak about it so well. And
thank you.
yeah, I think I can totally understand why that has become your sort of favorite there and how it resonates with you. What hard things have you got planned? Have you got any more challenges planned?
Well, I've got a couple. I'm writing a book right now that I was writing as Bruce was failing in his health, and unfortunately for me, it's a humorous book, and I'm not feeling very humorous, and so I've got to figure out how to channel that again and get that book done. So that's a hard thing.
Mm.
And then another thing that I really want to do is, because of this book and these 10 rules, I want to start doing some public speaking. I would like more than just podcasts, which are a lot of fun, but I would love to be up in front of a live audience and talking about these things that I learned. I've got these 10 subjects, and I have more than these 10. These are the 10 that I culled for the book. But I just I feel like that would be a lot of fun. And for me, that would be very outside my comfort zone. When I became an author in January of 2022 is when my book came out. My first book, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. And at that time, I was terrified to
Mm.
speak in public. Terrified. My very first podcast guest appearance, I couldn't eat all day because I thought I was going to be sick. I got onto the link that they give, so that you're there 45 minutes early because I was just, I didn't want to be late. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a mess. And now I actually enjoy it. I,
Yeah.
I like speaking, but for me, it's a very big step to kind of go outside myself and stand up in front of people as an expert or whatever it is, right? And get over that feeling that I have to put quotes around the word expert and to try to get out there. So that's another big hard thing that I'm planning to do.
So stepping outside your comfort zone, and you sort of saying about there putting quotes around the word expert, is there a level of imposter syndrome that
Oh yeah.
you felt doing this stuff? Because every time you push yourself out of that boundary, that's definitely a feeling that can
Oh yeah.
arise.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome is so real. And, I think the only way around it is to just keep doing it and to keep saying out loud, I am an author. I
Mm.
write good books. That's a hard thing to say. You feel like saying, well, I'm kind of an author and I write about books. And you have to be able to say, hey, I'm an author. I write good books. And so I need to be able to say, I'm a great public speaker. I would be wonderful at your organization at your next event, and to say that out loud is you almost feel like, I don't know, like you think you're bigger than you are or something. But I was teaching a marketing class, and the thing that I tell young authors, young meaning not in age, but in where they are in their journey as an author, is that your marketing won't work unless you believe in your book.
Yeah.
So if you don't believe you've written a great book, then no amount of marketing is going to make this book sell. That's just as simple as it gets. So I tell everyone the number one thing you have to be able to do is say, hi, my name's Teri M. Brown. I'm an author. I've written a great book. You should read it. And if you can't say that, then you need to work on that, right? You got to work on that. Well, I had a woman come in, and I don't know who she is because I couldn't see it. It just came in as a comment. And the person said, hey, there's a comment. And she said, doesn't that sound really conceited? And I kind of stopped and I thought, well, let's take it to a different occupation. If you have a toilet that is clogged and you call a plumber and the plumber comes in and says, oh yeah, I'm a great plumber. Not a problem. I can fix that in a jiffy. Do you think he's conceited, or are you just thankful you got a good plumber?
Mm.
And the answer is you're thankful you got a good plumber, right?
Yeah.
So we can say the same thing. And if you can't say it, then maybe your book isn't good. In which case, get it, don't have it for sale, fix it, right? But if you've got a good book, then you should say so.
Yeah. Yeah. That self-belief is definitely something that
Yeah.
is
And
so
it's hard.
important. It is so hard, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally resonate with that. And again, linking it back to what I know, the podcast is that, yeah, I have a podcast, and sometimes people will ask about it and my friends will say, go on, tell them about it. And I'm like, oh, well, it's just a hobby. It's not really. And it's like,
Yeah, see, you need to be able to say, hi, I'm Sam. I've got this great
yeah,
podcast. Give the name of your podcast, The Lonely Chapter, and
yeah,
then say, you should listen to it.
yeah. And do you know what? I went to the podcast show in about a month or two ago, and that was the first time where I started practicing saying it, because people were obviously there to know about podcasts, and
Right, right.
they're asking, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I host a podcast. Tell me about it. Okay. So is that good practice of exactly what you're talking about, of
Yeah,
backing yourself essentially, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. And even if that voice in your head is screaming, no, you have to ignore that voice. You have to put that imposter, you just have to shove that away and make the person who's able to come on a podcast, who's able to write a book, who's able to do whatever they do, bring that person to the forefront and let them take over the show and tell the imposter, you can talk to me later at home. Because sometimes the imposter is going to come out. There are times that I sit and I think, you're just, if they only knew.
Yeah.
If they only knew. And it's like, but the thing is it doesn't matter what they know. I've got books out. I've won some awards. They're good books, right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I wrote them as a pantser style, or that I binge write, or that I don't necessarily do everything that some book says that I should do. That book was written by an author too, right? So yeah, you just have to be able to take that doubting person and say, okay, I'll give you like 3 minutes a day first thing in the morning, and other than that, you don't get to come out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that I've heard Jimmy Carr talk about, the comedian, and he's actually very insightful a lot of the time. And he spoke about this idea that there's someone out there with way less skill than you, but they're earning 5 times the money than you because they got 5
Yeah.
times the confidence.
Yeah, because they think they're great. And because they think so, everybody else goes along with them. Oh, he must be great. Yeah, it's crazy. And so there really is a lot to, are you willing to stand on a tabletop and sing and dance with your book? And scream and shout, or for you with your podcast, or for whatever it is you're doing in your life where you feel like an imposter. The truth is are you doing it? If you're doing it, you're not an imposter.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. And that reshaping as well, like I've spoken about reframing things a lot of the time,
Yeah.
and reframing imposter syndrome to growth opportunity
Right.
is something that Stephen Bartlett talks about. And that idea that you step outside your comfort zone, you get a little bit more comfortable in that little extra bubble, then your comfort zone grows to include that. And then you step outside it again, just a little bit. And every
Right.
little bubble that you add on just grows that and grows it.
Well, and it increases your ability to be an expert in whatever it is that you're doing. Right. And you don't do it all at once. You can't go from I've never done a podcast to I'm an expert in a day. You can't go from I've never written a novel to I'm an award-winning best-selling novelist in a day. Those things don't happen. That's not the way it works. And so you have to look at it's a progression. And along the way, you're still good at what you do. Can you be better? Well, sure. I don't know anybody who can't be better. And anyone who thinks they can't get any better than they are really has a problem. I mean, they've got, there's a problem. They need to work on that pride just a little bit, because couldn't we all, even the very number one top seeded tennis player in the world, practices?
Yep. Yeah,
They don't
100%.
go home and say, I don't have to learn anything, because as soon as they do, someone else takes their spot.
Mm.
Right? We can keep learning, we can keep growing. And so that imposter syndrome is that thing that tries to stop you from doing that, that tries to tell you you're really not good enough and you'll never be good enough. And the answer to that is I'm as good as I am today and I'll be better tomorrow. And you just keep going.
Yeah. This podcast is called The Lonely Chapter. So I just want to explain what that is to you. So it's this idea by two podcasters I listen to, Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozy, and it's to do with when you're making habits or changes to self-develop yourself and you start to grow away from the people around you. Maybe you're making different choices on a Friday night, you're staying in to read or whatever it is, but you're not yet developed enough to be around the people you want to be around. So you're in that sort of lonely chapter in the middle. Have you ever gone through a period like that that you can recall?
I feel like maybe I'm in one right now.
Mm.
The I know who I was with Bruce, and I kind of have an idea where I'm headed, but and it's maybe not quite the same, but things like we had couples friends
Yeah.
that going out and doing things with now feels very awkward because I'm not a couple. But I don't feel like a single.
Yeah.
I still feel very married.
Yeah.
And so where does that put me, and what does that look like? So yeah, I think that whenever you're making changes, whether they were forced on you, this one was very forced on me. I didn't choose this, or whether you've chosen it,
Mm.
you find yourself in a space of, I don't like, you're right, the old friends. It's not that they're not still there, but the relationship is now very different,
Yeah, it's changed.
right? And then the new friends supposedly then are going to be singles, which like I said, don't yet feel like. So in the same kind of sense of I'm not quite at that space. So what does that look like? And so yeah,
Mm.
I think, and I'm sure there have been other times in my life. It's really hard to think beyond whatever you find yourself sitting
Of
in the
course.
moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but no, well, okay. So as I was a new mom. I was 26, 27 years old. I started going to church for the first time in my life.
Right.
Okay. I know during that period of time, I was not hanging with some of the people I was hanging with before, because I was changing how I was living on a day-to-day basis. I was really trying to live a religion that I felt comfortable with. And I still felt like any minute the church was going to collapse on my head because I wasn't doing it right. Like I'd walk in the building and just think, because I
Mhm.
didn't feel like I was good enough to even really be doing this yet. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think whenever you're learning something new, you're in that phase of it's kind of scary,
Yep.
because it'd be so easy just to say, never mind, I'm going back to what I know.
Yeah. So easy
You
to
know,
just drop back into that
yeah, the,
comfortable
the
place.
devil you know is better than the devil you don't. Go right back to what you know. And really, in order to have any kind of growth, you have to be able to sit in that space.
Hmm.
You have to be able to say, okay, I am giving that up, and I know there's more coming for me, and I just kind of have to be a little bit patient and wait while it and I grow into one another.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah. What have you learned from your time writing? Obviously, you spoke about how long you've been writing and various different types of writing. Has what sort of first inspired you to write changed? Has your motivations changed? What sort of lessons have you learned along the way?
I think I think my motivations have changed some. I mean, at first I was writing almost like to prove that I could,
Mm.
you know, like see, I can do things. Now I'm writing, I think, because I love it, because like I don't know how to not write. It'd be like saying, why do you breathe? Well, because my lungs go in and out. Like, Like I have ideas, and then if I don't write them, I'd end up nuts. Like, talking to my imaginary friends, and people would have me in a cage somewhere. Um, but what have I learned? I've learned a lot of things about writing. I've learned a lot of things about like me and what I think about the world, and
Mm,
it comes out in my writing. And then it makes me explore things.
yeah.
It's like, ooh, where did that thought come from and why? You know. Um, it's also made me as I'm going through my day, I notice things I didn't notice before. I pay attention more to interactions between people, how they're holding themselves when they're speaking. I'll glance over and think, oh, that's an argument happening, that I might not have ever paid attention to before. And then once I realize it, then I'm watching, how did I know that was an argument?
Mm,
I'm taking notes in my head. The other thing that I've noticed that has changed for me is when I'm reading a book, it's very difficult to read just for the sheer pleasure of reading,
right.
because I'm now doing things like reading the book and enjoying it and taking notes in my head. Ooh, I like that turn of phrase. Wow, whoa, I'd never considered taking a noun like that and turning it into a verb to make, oh, that was cool. Or, ooh, that was a little flat. That conversation, what about that didn't, like, I'm analyzing
Analyze. Yeah.
because I'm going to go write later. And so it's really hard to just read for fun.
Yeah, for sure. Um, we spoke about sort of advice for anyone sort of trying to get started with writing, but maybe someone's already started and they are doing a bit, and maybe they've published something, but they're not seeing the sort of success that maybe they imagined. And what advice would you give them if they were sort of thinking, maybe this isn't for me? Should I carry on?
I think the first thing they have to do is define what success is to them,
Hmm.
and then determine whether that's even realistic. The truth is most authors don't become James Patterson. I mean, it just rarely happens. So you have to look at, like, is what I expect likely?
Hmm.
Now, it's always possible, but is it likely? And then look at the timing as well, because once again, you do not write your first book and it turns, very few people publish their first book and it turns into a blockbuster best hit seller that propels them forward, and from that point on they never go back. I have talked with authors who did make it big very quickly, and their second book fell flat, and it took them another 7 or 8 to even begin to come back to any kind, like book number 1, and then and they lost their agent, and their publishing company didn't want them anymore. And I mean, it's not as easy as you write a book and someone just loves it and turns it into a movie. It's rare.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's rare. And so you need to, like, be a little bit realistic about what can happen, and be realistic about the timing of when that happens.
Hmm.
I've been writing for 3.5 years now. My books currently pay their own bills. So the marketing that I do, everything else is coming from the proceeds of the book. That's actually amazing in 3.5 years to have gone from a complete nobody
Yeah, really good.
to the fact that I now essentially have a hobby that pays for itself,
Yep.
right? I want more than that. I believe I can get more than that, but it's not going to happen instantaneously. And I work hard at it.
Mm,
I do a lot of marketing. I do a lot of other things to get my name out there. I'm on podcasts all the time. I'm on somewhere between 60 and 100 podcasts a year as a guest. I get out there. I put myself out there. I do a lot of other kinds of marketing. I have my social media channels that I'm always putting things out on. I do a lot
yeah.
to make sure that I'm out there, and it's been 3.5 years and it pays for itself.
Yeah, that's a great place to be, isn't it? As a sort of step on the ladder, I suppose,
Yes.
is yeah, finding something that making it be able to pay for itself, like you say, as a hobby that you love doing, but to have it pay for itself, to then move on from that is the next
to
stage,
the
right?
next level,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that what I tell people is, if you're looking for insta success and insta cash, this is the wrong field. Get out, run for the hills. You're in the wrong space.
Mm.
But if you're writing because you love it and you're willing to put some work into it, then you have to have a realistic timeline.
Yeah.
And that timeline is not instantaneous, and it's not in weeks or months, it's in years. And you have to be willing. Are you willing and able to do that? And if the answer is no, then yeah, maybe getting out is the right thing. And for some people, success isn't about the number of books sold, success is about the number of books written.
Mm.
And that's good too. So
Yeah.
for you, if it's, hey, I've always wanted to have 5 published books,
Yeah,
right?
that's interesting, reshaping what the goal is as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. We often
Yeah,
think
so you
of,
have to define what it is. That's another one of my rules in the book, is define your success. You
yeah.
have to know what that looks like. So when we were riding across the United States initially, our thought was is we were going to ride every single mile. Well, what about those miles you can't ride and you have to push?
Mm.
What about the road that's torn up for 10 miles and the only way across it is to hitch a ride in the back of a pickup truck? Are we failures now? You have to define your success in a way that allows you to be successful.
Yeah. It makes me think of, I spoke to a guy called Craig Sadler who rode across the Atlantic a few years back, and he was talking to me. He was in a crew of 2, and his partner was, his success was getting there. That was it. So the whole way across, it was, how much closer are we with this guy? They were still this fast, this many days, whatever. And Craig's idea of success was, after every 2 hour stint of rowing, it was another 2 hour stint done. And that was like a little win. So he was looking
Yes.
at every single little 2 hours as a win.
Right.
But they worked so well together because they had such different values of success, but both valid in their own way.
Both valid. And
Yeah.
I'm not even saying that one is better than the other. I'm just saying you have to figure out what is success to you. What does that look like?
Mm.
And then can you continue and persevere until you get whatever that success is? And if the answer is no, then maybe you're in the wrong space.
Mm.
Or maybe you need to redefine your success, but one way or the other, you're going to have to make some changes. So, I mean, that's what I would say to someone who's like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Well, is it you just need to change your expectations and then you'll be okay? Or is this really not good for you?
Yeah.
Is this really a bad space for you? Because it might not be the right space for you. I don't think everyone's intended to be an author any more than everyone's intended to be anything else in the world.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I think it's great advice. Bringing it into a close, and Teri, one of the things I like to do at the end of an episode is ask my guest to leave a question for the listener. So that the listener can go away and start a conversation, maybe about what they've been listening to, maybe it's unrelated. But if you could give them a question to go and start a conversation with someone, what would that question be?
I think it would be, what is one thing on your bucket list that you can take off your bucket list and start doing today?
Nice.
And I don't mean that you have to complete it today, but that you start toward it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's one thing that you can do to remove an item from your bucket list and put it more or less on your to-do list? What could you do today to start that? Because I don't believe in bucket lists anymore.
Okay.
If it's important enough to be on a list, then go do it. And if it's not important enough to go do it, then what's it doing on your list?
Yeah, very true. I like that a lot. Teri, it's been awesome to have you on. Thanks so much for coming on. If people want to find you online and see what you're up to, where can they find you?
The best place to go is my website, which is my name, TeriMBrown.com, and that's Teri with one R, so TERIM Brown.com. There you'll be able to find my social media. I have a newsletter you can sign up for. All my books are there. You can find my podcast there. And I even have just a contact me page. So if you wanted to reach out and just ask me a quick question or whatever, I always try to get back with people who reach out.
Excellent. I'll link your website down below for anyone listening or watching. They
Super.
can just
Thanks.
scroll down. To the listener, thank you so much for listening. If you have enjoyed this episode, please do share it with someone that you think would find some value from it. If you haven't already, please do follow the show and rate the show wherever you're listening. It really helps us reach new people and get more people involved in the conversation. And if you want to follow on Instagram, keep up to date with what we're doing, then you can follow us at Lonely Chapter Podcast. And lastly, from me, thank you for listening and stay curious.